Typically when you're talking about bad movies, you're talking about movies with plots that are ludicrous or don't really make much sense. But with Eclipse, that's not so much the case. I mean, it made enough sense for my head not to explode as long as I gave myself enough brain damage prior to get into Stephenie Meyer's absurdly heteronormative frame of mind. The main problem is that I just outlined the plot in about 2 minutes for a book that is over 600 pages long and a movie over 2 hours long. Jesus, Monty Python and the Holy Grail had more plot and still had time for plentiful scatological humor in a 92-minute runtime. What's with all these movies suddenly thinking they have an epic enough plot for a 2-hour runtime? If I took out all the unnecessary dialogue and awkward pauses in this movie, you would have an hour, tops. And the only parts that add any depth to the story are the backstories of the characters and the goings-on of the baddies, and that makes up maybe 5% of the movie's runtime. Even the action scenes fail to be exciting. There seems to be absolutely no one in this production that has an inkling on how to choreograph a fight. The intrusive CG just makes this plight worse. A lot of the problems in this movie could have been cured if the screenwriters had just stuck to one of the golden rules of writing. If a scene doesn't add to the plot, cut it. I know a lot of the scenes are supposed to be there for dramatic tension, but the dialogue is just completely unmemorable. And the plot is so paper thin, I could condense it even further. Here, watch. Bella like Edward. Edward like Bella. Bella like Jacob. Jacob like Bella. Jacob hate Edward. Edward hate Jacob. Tension ensues. Bella likes Edward more. Jacob is sad, has blue balls. Bad guys try to kill Bella, but fall victim to status quo. Vampires go have a party at Abercrombie and Fitch. I'll start out by savagely attacking the main characters of this epic saga, starting out with Bella. Bella. You see, Bella has codependency issues. If you wanted to see proof of that, you just had to read New Moon. She spends the whole book moping about Edward ditching her. She has no personality. She is defined by the fact that she is in love with Edward, and that's it. Or at least that appears to be it. You don't see it as much in this movie, but if you've seen the previous movies, you know that Bella completely dismisses anyone that doesn't have the hots for her. She completely brushes aside everyone's good intentions and causes her father to go through about 3 nervous breakdowns a week from her irresponsibility. She has no impulse control and no conception of a life beyond Edward. She's in love for the first time and has absolutely no idea of how to get over past relationships. She is marginally attractive, and this seems to be the only thing she has going for her. If you knew this girl in real life, you would avoid her like the plague and watch out for her first appearance on Cops. She's utterly depraved, and yet somehow everyone around her is willing to lay down their lives to ensure that this girl doesn't break a nail. And she's a horrible role model for everyone that reads these books and watches these movies, as she submits to the men around her and obsesses over them just constantly. Also, the plot requires that a shitload of people get killed to raise the vampiric army that attacks the Cullens, completely for Bella's sake. And she has absolutely no concept of how much damage she's doing on a large scale. She has left hundreds bereaved in her wake. Edward is no prize either, let me tell you. Although he has some detectable character traits, they completely revolve around his infatuation with Bella. He's just what the movie sees as a smooth and charming guy with a dark past, which I don't totally understand. He goes under absolutely no character development, except for his resolution not to kill Bella and hide all the evidence, which I don't really think counts. He's basically a stalker. He spies on Bella, follows her around, listens in on people's thoughts about her, and domineers over her at every chance. And this domineering brings about no plot conflict, because no, that would have been too interesting. And Jacob. Oh, Jacob. You know, he was actually a somewhat likable character in New Moon in that he wasn't horribly brooding, and in the short time he did become horribly brooding, he got over it. God, I wish more characters in this movie would do that. He had a believable personal conflict. He had a little bit of life beyond Bella, although everything eventually falls into a black hole of neediness. One of the main reasons that Eclipse infuriated me endlessly was that it tries its best to destroy this one ray of light in the series that is a putrid murk. In order to make sure that everybody's on board with Bella and Edward before they get married, Stephenie Meyer writes Jacob as just a complete jagoff in this book. He falls victim to the universe's obsession with Bella when any sensible group would have let her die off a long time ago. Anyways, he spends the whole movie being mopey and brooding. Wonderful. I can't blame the screenwriters too much on this because they were really as honest to the book as could be asked. I can, however, blame Stephanie Meyer. One of the advantages of the movie over the book is that you don't have to deal with Bella's inner monologue for hours on end, which is just awful. Unfortunately for me, they still included some of the inner monologue in the form of voiceover narration, which adds absolutely nothing to the plot. Bella just isn't deep enough to warrant introspection. It feels kind of like reading Jane Eyre if Jane was a shallow bitch and Charlotte Bronte had an ice pick lodged in her skull, and I was drunk, and we were in Dimension X. Still, the vast majority of this monologue is mercifully cut. The screenwriter's faithfulness to the book really shines through in the dialogue, because the dialogue is just as horrible as it is in the book. I mean, it's not cheesy or over the top, but I wish it had been, because then at least I could have laughed during this movie. As it stands, it's just boring and unrealistic. The dialogue scenes are all stationary. The characters just stand there exchanging their lines for a few minutes, and I guess one of them just gets bored and goes home. None of the characters have distinct voices, so it all blurs together in my mind. There were several points in this movie's talking scenes where I just started laugh-crying and pulling my hat over my face because I was just so bored. Do something. I've seen soap operas with more stimulating dialogue. The acting is bad. No surprise there. Once again, not laughably horrible, just bad. They only have the ability to convey one feeling, and that feeling is teen angst, which I've had enough of, trust me. Kristen Stewart spends the whole time with her mouth slightly agape once more. Honey, there's a reason they're called mouth breathers. She always looks like she's just slightly high, with her heavy-lidded stare. Robert Pattinson just looks like Robert Pattinson, which is just slightly awkward. No, not awkward, just, I know, a cocky asshole teenager. Yeah, that's about right. And Taylor Lautner just looks betrayed and completely unaware he should wear a shirt more often. The rest of the performances are so unassuming as to be nearly invisible. I liked it better when Jasper acted like a creeped out weirdo. I always liked to think he was contemplating how ludicrous everyone around him was acting and was always hatching an escape plan. This time he just looked like a rejected model for Da Vinci's St. John the Baptist. The main issue I have with the acting and directing in this movie, and I don't know if one's more to blame with the other, but for the moment I hold them equally at fault, is the awkward pauses in all the dialogue. I mean, just minutes of awkward pauses. Like that. Imagine if I did that the whole review. That is watching this movie. No one leaves as much space in a conversation unless they're secretly texting their friends at the same time. I mean, movie dialogue is unrealistically slow and composed in most cases, so that it doesn't seem as clunky as it is in real life, but this is really stretching it. Even more aggravating, I noticed about halfway through their eyes constantly flicker back and forth between looking at their listeners' eyes and chest during dialogue. Do you do this? I mean, if you're nervous when you're talking, you typically don't start checking the other person out. But what else could they be looking at? Maybe they're all wearing those t-shirts with stupid sayings on them and they're trying to get some reading in the pauses.